Okay, Mr. Mayor, right at 6.
All right. Council meeting of June 2nd, 2020 is now called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. And we'll have James Bode lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States
United
of
States of
America,
America,
and to
and
the
to
republic
for which it
stands,
stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you, James. I'm going to write that down so I can keep track next time. Donna, will you please do the roll call?
Yes, I will. Mayor Dorsey,
Here.
Councilmember Bode,
Here.
Councilmember Schmidt,
Here.
Councilmember Inesco,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Peterson,
Here.
Councilmember McDowell,
Present.
Councilmember Feast.
Here.
Did
All
I
right.
get everybody?
Is that it? All right. Let's move on. Do we have any changes to the agenda tonight? Either from council or from Jim?
I have no late changes, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Anyone else? No? All right. Hey, Jay, how you doing? Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as published?
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. All right, Finance Director Aaron B. Miller has a presentation for us regarding the 2019 budget year-end review. Go ahead, Aaron.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Let me just share my screen here. Hopefully everyone can see that.
Yep.
Yep. Great looking screen.
One second, okay. I have not had the opportunity to join you for quite some time. I don't know if that's good news or bad news for you. What we have tonight is our 2019 year-end financial status report. Just a couple of quick items before we get started. The numbers that we're presenting is 2019 actuals. They're all unaudited. We got our financial report, our annual financial report, into the state auditor's office on time. So by the end of the day Friday, then they extended it, but ours is in. Staff worked really hard on it, led by Terry. She did a great job. So looking forward to SAO coming out. We'll be providing the 2020 year-to-date update at the next council meeting. So, any concerns that we have about 2020, we'll try to address those at the next one, but want to get through 2019. So we'll start with cash. The first slide that you see, this graph shows the total cash available at the year end for city funds, and it includes, in this particular graph, it includes the Shelton Municipal Park District Fund. The columns that you see are associated with the y-axis values on the left-hand side. So the columns are dollar amounts. And the line part of the graph that you see demonstrates the percent of total from each particular fund as it goes up to 100%. So you can see that nearly 50% of the city's cash is made up by the sewer fund and the general fund. Also, if you just took a look at the street fund, the water fund, the sewer fund, the solid waste, and storm, that makes up just about 60% of our cash balance. So the general fund, which is the only unrestricted cash that can be used for any good governmental purpose, is about 21% of our total cash at the end of 2019. Looking at cash and investments, the year ends are there. On the right-hand side is 2017 and moving toward the left, then is 2018 and 2019. You can see we've increased our cash by about $4 million over 2018. That's about 35%. And then the increase from 2017 is about 7% between 2017 and 2019. And cash, it's one of those things, it's a measure, but we don't want to put too much into it because there are reasons that cash balances go up and down depending on what type of activities we're having in any given year. The pie chart on the right then is our mix, our 2019 mix of cash. And so you can see that we have about 23% of our cash in our key bank account, a large amount, nearly 62% in the LGIP, and that is the local government investment pool. And then we have about 15% or so in investments, and those are our longer term investments. We'll go into those a little bit more when we do our 2020 presentation in a couple of weeks. So here is our ending fund balances by fund for 2019. Again, keep in mind that this is a snapshot in time for 2019 activities. And what we're looking for here is not so much that fund balances changed, but rather if the change is alarming. If it looks, again, sometimes we use more money than we bring in for known and budgeted purposes, but we just want to make sure that nothing looks too out of line here. And what you can see, a couple of the big ones in the sewer fund as well as the capital improvement fund. If you look all the way to the second from right column, that's the dollar change between the 2019 beginning fund balance, and then we have our actual revenues as unaudited, but our actual revenues. Less expenses is our ending fund balance, and then we have the dollar change and the percent change. Street fund makes sense. Street fund began in 2019. So council enacted the street fund to begin in 2019. So obviously it goes from zero to the fund balance that they have. The capital fund and the sewer fund, a couple of the bigger ones, those are related to grant activities that came in 2019, largely for activities in 2018, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But overall, it looks fairly strong. Nothing to be concerned about here, and that's again one of the reasons that we want to pay attention to this is not so much whether it goes fund balances go up or down, but whether there's something in there that it's alarming to us. Moving on to revenues. So this is all funds revenue, actual as a percent of budget. And as you can see, we have a red line there for about where 100% of budget would be. And in most cases, we are above that line. There are a couple of 2 or 3 cases where we're below them. Again, this is similar to the fund balance slide. We want to look at this as not a measure of goodness or badness so much, but as a measure of does it make sense? So if we look, for instance, at the solid waste fund there, right about in the middle of your screen, there's a corresponding decrease in expenses as well from budget. And so while that looks like we came very short on our revenue estimates as a percentage, it really isn't so. Solid waste is funded through a reimbursable grant. And so for the expense, when we get to the expense side, you'll see that the expense side is also low. Same story really for payroll benefits and EM&R funds. The expenses also were a little bit lower. So this is a good example of looking at the payroll benefits fund on the fund balance slide, which I'm sure you won't remember, but the 2019 actual expenses for the payroll benefits was about $112,000. And the fund balance slide shows a fund balance of roughly $140,000. So as we look at this, what we need to bear in mind is that we probably don't need to carry a fund balance of 125% in the payroll benefits fund, as an example. So what we want to look at is, as we continue to budget out a few years, do we kind of hedge back a little bit on the transfers to the payroll benefit fund until we meet some kind of normalcy or some level of fund balance that makes a little bit more sense. Also important to keep in mind is that the city is cash-based, which means that expenses are accounted for when payment is made, not when they are incurred, and revenues are accounted for when payment is received, not necessarily as earned. So in some cases, the sewer fund is a good example. In 2019, we received reimbursable grant revenue that was earned in 2018 and is showing the revenue in 2019 when we actually received the money, and therefore we're showing about 110% of budgeted revenue there. This slide 8, revenue by fund, is a companion with the previous slide, and really it provides the same information in table view. And so you can see our 2019 budget on the kind of the second column from the left, then our actual amounts, the variance then to budget, and the percent of budget, which you just saw in the previous slide. Revenue by fund, comparison by year. Excuse me. This slide provides information on total revenue by year, but this, as with the previous two slides, needs to be taken a little bit with a grain of salt. Grant receipts in 2019 account for roughly $4.5 million of the 7.5 total increase, and those are one-time revenues for projects where the expenses were incurred in 2018. So again, what we want to look here is, does anything alarm us or look out of place? Really, at this point in time, it doesn't. Again, the street fund is showing 0 in 2018. It was created in 2019, so that accounts for the large difference there. And revenue for reimbursable grants in both the capital and the sewer really account for those two large revenue increases there. So again, everything here looks fine, nothing to be alarmed about. This slide is another companion, and it's meant to illustrate the mix of revenues from year to year. And so you can see it's the same information based on 2019, which is the pie chart on the right of the screen, as compared to 2018, which is the pie chart on the left of the screen. And again, what we're looking for here is anything unusual. You can see that for the most part, while things did move around a little bit, the pie shape largely is about the same. There is an increase in intergovernmental that I just want to mention real quick on the 2019 as you look at the 2018. And that's largely, again, we've talked about those reimbursable grants, mostly due to Basin 3 and the downtown connector that come in as state grants, and that's an intergovernmental type of revenue. Oops, did I go one too far? I did. Slide 11 then, this is total revenue by type, and this is where we break down the revenues that we did bring in into whether they're taxes, charges for services, fines and penalties, intergovernmental, licenses and permits, miscellaneous, or other funding sources. The other funding sources at the bottom of the screen are really transfer-ins. Often it's transfer-ins of general fund dollars to other funds. The top part of this graph shows revenue collected by type and percentage as compared to budget. So again, you can see that in all but other financing sources, we came in at budget. The red line there represents about 100% at budget or a little bit lower. Some of the big variances that you see there in taxes, of the $1,000,001, $1,000,002 nearly, about 860 is an increase in sales tax from previous year. And then about 200 of that is increases in utility tax. Intergovernmental, we talked about it on the last slide. That $5 million increase is reimbursable grants for the downtown connector and for Basin 3 that came in 2019. The reduction in licenses and permits is mostly due to reduction in building permits and plans review. And then other financing sources, that really is mostly suggests the transfer of dollars from the general fund to the street fund, both in terms of transportation benefit dollars that were accumulated in the general fund in previous years and transferring over to the street fund, as well as general fund support for the street fund in 2019. The next slide then is our taxes. We're breaking down that tax line into property tax, sales tax, B&O tax, and so on and so forth. Again, the top is against budget, where you can see that for the most part, we came in either above budget or very close to our budget amount. The increase in city sales tax or city utility tax down below the 200, well, let me start at the top. We talked a little bit about the 806 in retail sales. That was the increase over 2018 there. The city utility tax, that is mostly due to solid waste utility tax that has come in. Back when we made the agreement to transfer that service to Mason County, they essentially gave us an upfront amount for utility tax, and as they collected that amount, it came off of the amount that they gave us, and so now we're starting to receive that money again, and so that's the driving force behind that. Let's see. All funds, again, this is just another way to view this. All funds tax collection by percent and type. What we want to do is we want to look to see if there's anything unusual. And as you can see, for the most part, the numbers have stayed pretty consistent between the 2 years, 2019, again, on the right-hand side, 2018 on the left-hand side. And again, you know, it does show that roughly that we make our hay on retail sales tax and property tax. About 68% in each year comes from those two sources, and the rest of the sources make up the remaining 32%. Showing the general fund. So the previous slides were showing all funds, which included the general fund, and wanted to show you just the general fund by itself. Same slides as you've seen, or at least same view of slides. The top part is total collections by percent as compared to budget. And then down on the lower part is the table, which kind of shows in value form what that graph shows, but it compares to actual revenues from previous years. We talked about taxes. That's the sales and use tax that has gone up. Charges for goods and services. A large part of that is Metropolitan Parks reimbursement for parks and recreation services. The large decrease in the intergovernmental revenue in the general fund is mostly due to the TIB streetlight grant, as well as the motor vehicle fuel excise tax that used to be collected in the general fund, but then in 2019 is now collected in the street fund. And again, licenses and permits, or that decrease that you're seeing there, is largely due to building and permit fees activities. General fund tax collections. Again, top graph shows the percent to budget, 100% of budget, looks like we're almost there. And then on the bottom part shows our tax collections as compared to previous years. Interesting thing about sales tax in this particular view, retail sales tax, the Transportation Benefit District sales tax is no longer collected in the general fund. So when that $600,000 is now in the street fund, but yet we still, even when we moved that revenue out, we collected about 114 more than we did in 2018. So very, very strong year for sales tax. And again, the city utility tax is from mostly from the solid waste. Same picture again, what we want to do here, 2019 on the right, 18 on the left. We want to view to see if there's anything outside of the lines that might tip us off that there's an issue. Again, pretty steady as a comparison of the 2 years and the mix of general fund tax types. And similar to the total tax, general fund, 68% comes from property tax and retail sales and use tax, and the rest are filled in by other amounts. So getting to the expense side here, as an expense side, this slide, quite honestly, doesn't really tell us much, because on the expense side, we will do supplemental budget adjustments throughout the year because we cannot overspend our expenditures above the amount approved by council. So what we would be looking for here is there would be trouble if anything was over 100%. And of course, as you can see here, things get very close to 100%, but none have gone over that amount. I did want to make mention on the top part of this page, the solid waste. We talked about when we looked at the revenues, that the solid waste number was low on revenues. And I said you'd see that same kind of corresponding decrease in expenditures. And you can see it in this view here. The lower part of this breaks down our total expenditures, total city expenditures by expense type, salary, benefits, supplies and equipment, services and charges, debt service, capital, and then transfers out. And again, all of those are underneath the 100% as well. Slide 19 here, excuse me, this slide shows the change in expense levels between years. Similar to how we talked about with the revenue, it's the same for expenses. Whether or not expenses in the fund went up or down based on the previous year doesn't necessarily indicate that it's been a good year or a bad year. What we want to make sure is if they did go up or down by significant amounts, does it make sense? So in this case, looking at the general fund, it went down by $275,000 as you compare to 2018, but we also moved street fund activities out of that fund in 2019, and they are now accounted for in the street fund. So as you can see, that next line down, street fund has an expenditure amount of $1.2 million almost. So the general fund reduced our activity by about $1.2 million and came in about 275 under 2018, where the street fund activities were. So had the street fund activities been in the general fund, it would not be a reduction of 2.1%, rather it'd be an increase of about 6.9%. So again, those are the types of things we want to look at to make sure they make sense. The capital fund is related to construction work for downtown connector and Basin 3, same with sewer fund, though, as well for Basin 3. Construction activity, that's a decrease from what they did in 2018. And then EM&R fund went up, EM&R fund for the equipment maintenance and rental fund. That is a fund where we accumulate balances over time for equipment purchases when they need to be made. And in that year, that's what's taking place there is equipment purchases. So again, expenses move up and down, but we just want to make sure that that it makes sense to us on why they did so. Slide 20 then is all funds expense change by category. And on the top, what you can see is as a comparison of 2019 and previous years, you can see the category for our expenditures, and the bottom half of this just graphically illustrates the percent change between 2018 and 2019. Supplies and equipment, large reduction there, relatively large reduction there. That is a reduction in overall construction supplies that we purchased in 2019 as compared to 2018. And then services and charges, which shows a increase. That is professional services for construction activities. And again, because we're cash-based, that could be a timing issue where the expense was really incurred in 2018, but because of timing of getting the invoices, they were paid in 2019. Because we're and as we're cash based, that's when that expenditure shows up. So again, we want to look at this to make sure things make sense, and there wasn't anything there to alarm us. Again, another way to view this through pie charts, so that we can take a look. Are there any outliers? 2019 on the left, on the right, 2018 on the left. And again, the pie shapes and the numbers, they really show a similar mix from the previous year. Slide 22, then, this is general fund expense to budget by department. Same story as when we talked about the first slide. There's not a lot to see. Our legal expenditure is at the fund level. So if you look at this, you can see that the police department is just peeking over that 100% line, and that's fine, because as long as the general fund in total does not overspend, we don't need to make any adjustments. And the reason that the police department expense is just peeking over that 100% is at the end of the year, we went ahead and the police purchased some badly needed police vehicles and equipment that was desperately needed. So that's the reason for that little overage there. Slide 23 then, again, this is showing, comparing 2019 to 2018 by city department. Same story as we've talked about before. Whether or not the 2019 actual expense is larger or smaller than the 2018 isn't a measure of good or bad, as long as the changes make sense. In admin services, we added mid-year, if the council will remember, we added a position, the payroll position, into that fund or into that department. The city manager, that reduction is largely due to FTE counts that went down between 2018 and 2019. Same with public works, there was a reduction in FTE, so salaries and benefits went down on that fund. And again, streets activity is no longer in the general fund, and so it shows 0 at the bottom of the 2019 column. Slide 24 then, general fund comparison by expense category. This shows, again, the top half are the expense categories as they compare to the previous years. And then down on the bottom is graphically the percent change. Really, we've talked about most of these things. I will say that the percent change, especially when it comes to transfer out, that large transfer out amount, is about the same amount as the reduction in salaries and benefits and service charges for when the street fund left the general fund and went into its own. And then we provided some additional support. So that really kind of talks about the biggest changes there. Second to last slide here. Again, we want to look at this graphically to see if there are any outliers. 2019 mix of general fund expenses on the right and 2018 mix of general fund expenses on the left. For the most part, there isn't a large change. You'll see that the salary and benefits in 2019 decreased a little bit, and the transfer outs increased. We talked about that on the last slide, that's largely due to the moving street fund into its own special revenue fund and out of the general fund. So really the overarching story of this is that there's really no surprises in our 2019 financial activity. Fund balance levels increased by 35%. Importantly, I think the general fund, street, water, sewer, and storm drainage all met or exceeded the fund balance desired levels that was agreed upon last year, which is 16% for the general fund and street fund and 20% for those other funds. And that's fund balance as a percent of current year budgeted expenditures. Tax revenue, especially sales and use tax, are strong again in 2019, bolstered largely by construction activity. We talked about that quite a bit last year. Our 2020 adopted budget does adjust for a normalization of construction activity back down closer to 2017 levels. Total expenses increased by 2.6% in from 2018 levels, while the general fund expenses decreased by 2.1%. We talked about reasons behind that. Salary and benefits overall only increased by 0.4% from 2018. And our 2019 financial activity has placed the city in a much better financial position to be able to work through the impacts that are taking place in 2020, directly in relation to COVID. And we will be talking about that at our next council meeting. So unless there are questions, I will stop sharing. I'm happy to answer any that you might have.
Anyone have any questions? I have a statement, I guess, is that one thing you just touched on was how much better shape we are in now than we were back in 2017. And just think if this COVID would have hit back then, man, I think we'd be in a world of hurt. And I'm just more and more impressed with the finance department. And more than that, I'm confident. So
Great.
I have that confident feeling. I hope everybody else does as well.
Great. Well, I appreciate that. I'll pass that on for sure.
All right. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we move on. There's no business items to discuss tonight, so we'll move on to action. The first item on the action agenda tonight is a contract change with Aspect Consulting for the C Street landfill. City engineer Ken Gill has the details for us. Yeah, there he is. Okay, Ken.
Okay, Council, thank you for letting me present to you again this week. So this is kind of a lot of a repeat of what we talked about last week. Brooke was really kind and updated the presentation that we did, and which is kind of the next topic we'll talk about. But really what this is in front of you keeps Aspect Consulting working on closing out our landfill. And I'm kind of excited about it because I kind of feel like we're really at a point where you should get excited and celebrate, because we've done a lot of field work, done a lot of sampling with outside contractors and also our own staff, and have now got a document in front of Ecology that they've blessed and is now up for public comment. So I can zip through these slides, but they're real similar to, or that they're identical to the ones that I shared with you last week. So it's located out on the other side of 101, out on the other side of the cemetery out there. It's about just under a 17-acre site. We acquired the property in 1928, and it was a landfill up into the 1980s. So in 2016, we signed an order with Ecology to clean it up. And we selected Aspect Consulting, particularly Carla Brock gets all the praise for doing the lion's share of the work to complete that work for us. We hired Holocene Drilling to go out there and drill some wells. There's another picture of it again. They took some samples. We took some soil gas samples out there. We used our own backhoe to dig some test pits. There's our guys. But kind of where we're at right now, we got this report. Since I've talked to you last time, we've gotten this report back from Ecology, and it's out for public comment. The report talked about some alternatives, and I want to share with you a little bit more detail what they are. So if someone asks you questions, what are the alternatives we're discussing? So I'm gonna flip to a different screen here, and it's a table, and there's a lot of words and a lot of things on it. But what I want to point out to you is the alternatives across the top, and particularly alternative 1, and it goes down to 4. So alternative 1 is putting about a 3-foot stack of dirt on top of the whole thing. Basically some geotextile, 2 feet of some sand and gravel, and then another foot of topsoil. And the reason why the consultant is recommending that is because it's implementable. So it means we can do it. It's also, if you look down to the estimated cost column down here, it's one of the lower cost options. The other end of the spectrum is just hauling it all away. And that cost over there is astronomical. It's around 32 million. So Ecology is working through this process right now, doing the public participation process for us. But this is what we've kind of spent to date, and this is where we've headed. So do you guys have any questions about the work that Aspect has done for Shelton or the C Street landfill?
Ken,
Go ahead, Kathy.
I'm not saying do the $32 million one, but if someone was to do that one, that with no guarantee that they would get it all, right?
Kathy, I think that would be a really tough one to implement. It'd be a
Well, I know, I'm
tough
just
one to
saying,
sell just because of the cost.
yeah. But if someone went in and wanted to do that one, which we won't do, I'm sure, it's no guarantee that digging it out and hauling it away is going to get it all, right?
I'd agree with you because the contractor digging it out wasn't the one dumping it there.
Okay. Just question. Yeah, thank you.
I have a question. Alternative 1, that was about $1.5 million last time we were briefed on that, wasn't it? Did that go up?
You know what, Eric, I don't recall.
It wasn't your briefing, it would be before you.
Yeah, I don't remember. I do know that this
Okay.
is what Carla has came up with using 2019 dollars to estimate what the cost is. So,
Okay.
and unfortunately, Eric, we won't know exactly what that cost is until Ecology approves and blesses alternative 1, and we go out to bid and have some bids to show you.
Right. Could be lower than 2 million. Right?
And a quick, who chooses who ultimately is going to choose the solution here? Is this something Ecology will say, we recommend you move forward with alternative 1, 2, or 3, or 4? Or is this completely up to the city and Ecology just says any one of these alternatives meets the need, or 1 and 2 do and 3 and 4 don't, or something?
Joe, the question I heard you ask is that who decides? And they have a 30-day public comment, which ecology will listen to anybody that comments on it, including electeds. And then they evaluate all those comments. And if the comments, they need some more information, then they extend the comment period. But ultimately, ecology, with our consultant's recommendation, decides. And our consultant's recommendation in this report is alternative 1. So I'm hoping that's where we land.
All right.
Great. That's what I was driving at, was ultimately it's kind of ecology's say, and what they'll accept as a acceptable solution. So thanks for that.
All right. Do we have a motion for the contract change?
Mr. Mayor, if I could, because we are on Mason Web TV and on a Zoom meeting, if we could hold off any decisions for approximately 30 seconds to
Oh, sure.
allow for the delay lag, and anybody that does wish to comment is able to.
That's 30 seconds now, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Thank you, Donna.
You're welcome.
All right. Do we have a motion for the contract change with Aspect Consulting?
I move to approve the extension of the C Street landfill remedial investigation contract by authorizing the mayor to sign the contract change number 6 with Aspect Consulting.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any council members have anything else they want to add to that?
Just want to make a comment that this is a no-cost contract extension.
Okay.
That is correct, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought she was going to have a comment.
I just wanted to be clear that this is a no-cost contract extension.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. That's correct, Jeff?
That is correct. It's only an extension of time and does not add to the cost.
All right. So we have a motion and a second to approve the extension of the C Street landfill remedial investigation contract, authorizing me to sign contract change number 6 with Aspect Consulting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right. The last item on the action agenda is an update on the C Street landfill. City Engineer Ken Gill has information for us.
Well, folks, I kind of spilled the beans already. I gave you my update in the previous presentation.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I want to make sure that everybody knows, is aware of, is I'm going to stop my screen sharing and show you this report. So in my hands is the public review draft remedial investigation and feasibility study report. So the table that you just looked at is in this report, and that really, I think, really boils down to the dollars and the nuts and bolts of what's in this report. So this will be available on our website. It's what's out for public review, but that is everything. If you ever want to know anything about the C Street landfill. Backing up a little bit, Brooke did an excellent job detailing what we did since your last briefing. But basically, since your last briefing, what's happening was writing that report, getting ecology's comments, responding to their comments with some more test pits with the pictures of the backhoe and the pictures that I showed you, incorporating those comments into that report, and then getting it out on public comment. it's a lot of work on your public works crews, staff time, out there running equipment, doing locates, and then a lot of consultant time, digesting and cranking all that data to get it into Ecology's format and getting them to review it and getting comments back.
All right. Well, be sure to give Brooke some kudos for that, would you?
I'll be sure to pass that on.
And the crew.
Yes.
All right.
And as Ken mentioned, we will have that up on our website, and we'll also have the ability to access Ecology's comment system. So we can make it as easy as possible for interested parties to comment on the draft report.
And if we have any more needs to dig any test pits, Councilmember Onisco has volunteered to take his shovel out to the C Street site and dig whatever you need.
All right, Eric.
I don't think I own a shovel. I'm sorry.
All right, so there's no action on this particular item, so we can move on to administrative reports. Jeff, will you give us your manager's report, please?
I will, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, members of council, deputy mayor, and members of council, and any of the public that may be joining us this evening. I had a couple of public comments that I wanted to make sure that were relayed to council. And then I had several items that I wanted to talk about as well. So first, I received an email from a Mr. Ronald P. Glowen, and he wrote and asked that I relay this to you. He said, "Hello, I am reaching out to the city council out of grave concern over the killing of George Floyd and other killings that like it that happen month after month and year after year in our country. It is a national issue that plays out in our communities. We need leadership from local officials like you to prevent tragedies like George Floyd's death from happening here in our city. I ask you to take action to make sure every person in Shelton can feel safe and be treated with respect and free of discrimination when interacting with every city employee. I also ask that you work to make sure that the underrepresented members of our community are seen and heard when developing codes, policies, and designing how city services are delivered. Honestly, this is hard work that never stops, but it is the right thing to do, and it has never been more important for the safety and well-being of everyone in our community. Signed, sincerely, Ronald P. Glowen." So I wanted to make sure that the council saw that. Secondly, I had a email. I just received this at about 5:30, by the way, this evening, which is why it wasn't relayed to you directly through email. The second message I received was from our partners at the EDC, the Economic Development Corporation. They write, "Jeff Knighton, Mayor Dorsey, and Chief Moody. We wanted to take a moment to comment on the peaceful protest in downtown Shelton this past Sunday. We're thankful to the residents and individuals that participated in the march and thankful there were no negative impacts to our community or our already struggling downtown businesses. This was a situation that could have easily gotten out of hand. It didn't, and for that we are thankful. We want to compliment the Shelton Police Department for doing a great job of managing it, as well as Mary Ricker for her fantastic messaging to the community, not just this past weekend, but throughout this pandemic. You have an excellent team doing outstanding work. We are proud of them and our community." Signed, Best, Jennifer Baria, and Karin Leaf. Relay that one as well. And then I had a couple of things that I wanted to mention. I really wanted to commend all the groups that participated on Sunday here in downtown. They peacefully gathered and they exercised their constitutional rights to vocalize their anger. And also, I'm extremely proud of the Shelton Police Department. I thought they did a wonderful job of maintaining public safety and making sure everything that happened peacefully and that everybody could peacefully exercise their constitutional rights here in our city. Couple other things that I wanted to mention. There has been some concern around town about our water bills and what happened there, and I wanted to make sure I address that. So in March, our public works crews did their actual meter reads, which is typically how we do it. We count the number of units that go through the pipe into your home, and then where it's used, whether it's a dishwasher or the shower or whatever, your sewer rates are calculated based on your water usage. In April, because of the pandemic, we were not able to do actual reads. We simply estimated what your April bill would be based on previous month's usage. We estimated quite low, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One, we had several warm days in March and in April, where people, I'm sure, were irrigating, maybe filling up swimming pools, pressure washing their driveways, that kind of thing. But two, everybody was at home. All the kids were at home all week. All the families were home all week, and you're necessarily going to use more water when that happens. So we sent out the estimated bills, and then again in May we did an additional actual read. So we counted, excuse me, the actual number or the actual amount of water that went through the pipe. And based on those calculations, what's included in your May bill is your May and April charges less the estimate that we used, but there's going to be an additional amount on top of that because we estimated low. Pro rationing, which affects your sewer bill based on irrigation and things like that, didn't start until yesterday, June 1, which is another factor that goes into this. Excuse me. Now, most of this, those two factors, for the most part, are going to account for all of the water bills that people are seeing. 99% of them. There may be some instances where someone has a leak or things like that. But I wanted to make clear that our customer service team is available to answer questions. Right now, on a somewhat reduced schedule, they're here in the mornings till noon. But starting June 15th, they will be here 8 to 5. So we'll have someone available to answer questions at all times. Second to last, the governor issued a new proclamation yesterday concerning our council meetings and our conduct of council meetings. We are still not able to meet in person and won't be able to until June 17th. That's when the most recent proclamation ends. However, the necessary and routine requirements that we've been operating under to just consider paying the bills, like our aspect consulting contract that we discussed, and your consent agenda, we are able, according to the new proclamation, we are able to consider other items. However, there's a little bit of confusion there about what council is able to consider and what is not. The state attorney general will be issuing further guidance later this week to let us know what we can consider at our scheduled June 16th meeting and what we can't. And I'll be sure to update you that with that information when I get it or during our briefings next week. And lastly, to end on a good note, a happy note, we opened the parks yesterday, and that's fantastic since it's supposed to be in the 70s all week. But I do want to remind folks out there, recreate responsibly. Please keep distance. We're still even with everything else going on, we're still in the middle of a pandemic, and we want to make sure that we take care of ourselves and our families and our community. So parks are open. Go have a good time. Just do it with physical distance, please. And with that, that's all I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I just had a thought. June 17th is a Wednesday. Do we want to move to Wednesday that week, that month? Or just wait till July, whatever?
I think that moving council meetings, I'm already nervous that we are doing our very best to provide all the opportunity that we can for the public to participate in our meetings and be able to speak with you. I think if we start moving days around, that might make it a little more difficult.
That's, yeah. That's
But
fine with me. I
I'd be happy to consider that and then do whatever the council desires.
Okay.
Can I say something, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Miss Donna.
I think that the proclamation goes through 11:59 p.m. on the 17th, so we'd have to go. I don't want to
Ah,
meet you guys.
okay.
Donna's getting comfortable being on camera.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, so comfortable.
So let's bag that thought I had. Okay, does anybody else have anything to add tonight?
I just wanted to say, echo Mr. Glowin's sentiments, as well as our partners at Economic Development Council, and just a huge thanks to our whole community. And it's wonderful to support all of our people, our Black community as well. And then on another good note, I've been watering my garden like crazy since March. I know that my bill went way up, but I'll tell you what, I've got a whole host of radishes. I got turnips I'm about to get. I got lettuce. So I don't know. I'm pretty excited about my green growing that I've got going on. So.
Yeah, you could sell them to make up for the water bill.
There you go. Well, I'm hoping to actually have a little bit of a. I'm trying to get a little bit of a. We've got a little library. My neighbor has a little community library for our neighborhood, so I'm going to try to do the community bounty basket.
Yeah. I'm incredibly proud of our police department and its leadership, and I thought they did a fantastic job, and they should be recognized for that.
That's right.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And thank our sheriff's department for their part in it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Our sheriff's department and all of our partners, Central Mason Fire was also part of that group, and all of both our police department and all of our partners did a fantastic job.
They did.
Yeah, I agree. All right. If there's nothing else, our next meeting will be Tuesday, June 16th at 6 o'clock. This meeting is adjourned at 6:57.
Night.
Night, everybody.
All right.